Hi, this is Adam,
I'm Dave.
and this is Fiction.
Or nonfiction.
Cue music.
Fiction. Or nonfiction.
Hey, so this is the show where we talk about viral news stories, urban legends, and unpack the meaty truth off the bone of lie. This is Fiction or Nonfiction. If you want to go through our previous episodes, go to Spotify. You can check us out there. And also on our YouTube page for Windsor Public Library. Lots of information. I do want to talk about something that I think our generation was refamiliarized with, a very famous legend, and one that, because of a certain animated movie, we became refamiliarized with. We're going to be talking about the legend of the Grand Duchess Anastasia.
Oh, okay.
So, as always, before we get into it, Dave, what do you know about Anastasia?
I don't know anything.
That's not true.
Some sort of royal person?
A royal person. I believe that's the official term.
Yeah, someone from the royal family.
Which royal family? There is more than one.
I don't know. The Windsor family?
Okay.
Yeah, how about you fill us in? Because I don't really know. I didn't know you were going here. I thought you were going to do an episode about monsters, but...
Well, I wanted to change things up a little bit. Don't worry, we'll be talking about cryptids in a future episode. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But I wanted to talk to you about this because this is a very infamous mystery, one that really was one of the most pressing and discussed mysteries of the 20th century, which is the history of the Grand Duchess Anastasia. So, who was Anastasia? Well, she was actually the daughter of Tsar Nicholas II, who was the sovereign of Imperial Russia.
Is this Princess Anne?
No, that's, again, from the UK.
Okay, continue.
But, good guess, though.
We're going with Russian royalty.
Let's talk about her father, Nicholas II. He abdicated the throne at the end of the 1917 February Revolution. Now, this was during which mass protest erupted all over Russia, basically stemming from long-standing discontent with the monarchy. The causes for this discontent included state-enforced food rationing and police violence. So there was a series of these demonstrations, and in the end, Nicholas II abdicated, and when he did, he ended 3 centuries of rule by the Romanov dynasty in Russia.
Okay.
So...
I've heard of them.
Yeah, you've heard of them. Good. Yeah, that is the origin of her father. So, of course, she was born set to be a Grand Duchess, so someone who was going to inherit a royal mantle. Now, following a lot of turmoil, Nicholas II and his family were eventually imprisoned in a house in Yekaterinburg, and this was called the Ipatiev House. The family and the retinue lived in the house for 78 days, and they would, on the 78th day, end their stay there. Why do you think that stay ended?
Because they ran out of ginger ale?
That was a very good guess. Oh, wait, no, sorry, I meant to say something else. It was a horrible guess. What do you think happened on that 78th day?
I don't know. Someone in the royalty got them out of there?
I like your optimistic interpretation of what could have happened. Actually, I regret to say that their stay ended in tragedy and bloodshed.
Wow.
So quite the opposite.
So everyone was killed.
Well, this is where we get into the meat of this mystery. So there are several accounts of what actually happened, but what we do know is that in the early hours of July 17th, 1918, Nicholas II and the royal family were herded by a group of Bolsheviks into an area, basically in the back of the house in a cellar room. There, the Bolsheviks opened fire, and they assassinated the entire family, severing the Romanov bloodline forever. Or so it was thought. And this is where the mystery comes in. A few years after the assassinations, a woman named Anna Anderson surfaced in Europe, claiming to be Anastasia. Anderson first made this claim in 1921 to a nurse who worked in an asylum in which she was being treated.
Okay.
Keep a pin in that. Anderson was admitted to psychiatric care after being rescued from a failed suicide attempt when she jumped off a bridge in Berlin. So this is actually taking place in Germany. Anderson claimed that she escaped the execution by being carried away from the site by mysterious benefactors. Is Anderson Anastasia?
I don't know. Oh, am I supposed to say?
Well, let's talk about, before we get into the actual history of this, let's talk about the plausibility. Do you think there could be any legitimacy to these claims?
Well, I suppose anything's possible. But the way you're framing these questions, it makes me believe that someone purposely led her out of there. Or they're making this up. This is just another person claiming to be someone they're not.
Mm-hmm. Because I did mention the first instance was when Anderson was being treated in an asylum. So I think automatically most people would scrutinize that. Maybe she's there because she's suffering from some sort of delusions, and that's how come she has this idea she's Anastasia. Despite the lack of evidence to support her claims, there were many who actually believed that Anderson was indeed Anastasia. Now, I'll give you some of the reasons why these supporters backed Anderson as being this person she claimed to be. There was no background information that could be found about Anderson's past. Through the asylum she was at and the hospital she was treated at, in spite of their research, they could find no information about an Anna Anderson or any family related to her.
There was no Google database?
Unfortunately, I think this was just a year or two before Google.
Okay.
So, right there, a lot of people point towards that as being evidence, saying, well, if this is just a pseudonym or if this is just a taken name that she has, maybe as part of the escape and fleeing the Bolsheviks, then, this points towards the fact that this is probably because she had no identity before this, because she was indeed Anastasia. Another thing that people brought up is the fact that even though she spoke German, the staff at the asylum described her as speaking with a Russian accent. So let's use your detective hat. What do you think about those pieces of, and I'm using air quotes here, evidence to support these claims of Anderson?
Well, I actually left my hat at home. But
your head did seem very cold today.
Yeah, it was chilly. But see, the way that this is one of those things, this has obviously been talked about a lot since this time. It's kind of hard to know. But you're you're leading me to believe the way you're talking with your words and
that's usually how I talk.
Phrases and intonations. You're leading me to believe that it wasn't this person at all. So I want to think maybe she did escape. Maybe the suicide attempt was also relating to getting out of there. And then she eventually got out and became, the Duchess. But I don't think that, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Well, let's talk about these claims, because whenever we do these sort of unpackings of mysteries, what do we always do? We always say, let's go back to the earliest recorded instance of whatever it is. The earliest recorded instance can't be found because she has no past.
That's suspicious. And also during this time period, record keeping was not on people's top priorities. Mm-hmm. It's not like now where people keep track of everything, including what they ate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Exactly. And then, things are digitized now. They're stored online or in clouds. Like there, you had a physical copy, and if that was destroyed, it's gone. It's gone to the annals of time.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you make of the Russian accent? Because this is the one that I was most curious about.
Well, if they had a Russian accent, it's making it sound like they were trying to hide it by speaking German.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I guess they could do like a blood test, but I don't think they were able to do those back then.
Not at that time, because don't forget, we're looking at the early 1920s.
Can we do that now?
We'll get to that in a little bit. Okay, these claims are dubious, and we don't really know.
There's nothing there to prove that this is the person. Unfortunately,
yeah.
There are rumors, but there's nothing definite. So I guess in that situation, based on the facts you've presented to me, I would say we can't confirm this is that person.
So at this time, with the technology and the information we have, we just can't really substantiate this claim one way or the other. We can't refute it. We can't substantiate it. It's just we don't know.
What about photographic evidence? Isn't there any old photographs where they could be like, this is this person?
Yes. So we're going to be talking about that. Just before we do, I want to talk a little bit more about Anderson and her struggle to really be recognized, I should say, for claiming this identity. In fact, she continued arguing that she was the lost daughter of the Tsar, so much so that she began pursuing a legal battle for this recognition in 1938. And this legal battle continued, you'll be surprised by this, into 1970.
That's a long time.
In fact, this case, as of now, I believe, is the longest running case ever heard by the German courts.
Wow.
So the final decision of the court was actually issued in 1970, and they said that Anderson had not provided sufficient proof to claim the identity of the Grand Duchess. So you mentioned photographic evidence. There were photos of Anastasia. They weren't the easiest to track down at that time because what was happening in Russia?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Bolsheviks executed them for a reason, because the Bolsheviks eventually would transition over to being the official Communist Party of Russia. So there was a lot of suppression. In fact, the main question I've heard people ask is, why did they execute the Tsar and his family in the first place? Well, to suppress any sort of loyalty that could have existed for the Romanov dynasty, to ensure that the Bolsheviks and the Communist Party would stay in power.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of that also involved withholding information about them, including photographs.
So they had stuff.
They did have stuff. It wasn't as easy to access, though. I mean, if only there was someone who was a family member or someone who saw Anastasia that could identify her, that would be key. So they brought in someone who knew Anastasia, who could identify her.
Oh.
Yeah. This would happen to be Baroness Sophie Buxhovenden.
How does she know her?
Well, she was actually a former lady-in-waiting for the Grand Duchess during Anastasia's lifetime.
Okay.
So she visited Anderson to meet her in the hospital because she heard quite a bit about this mysterious woman that claimed to be Anastasia.
Mm-hmm.
She saw her and said, "This cannot be Anastasia. She is not the right height. She doesn't look like her. So, by this eyewitness account, was not actually her."
But that person could have been lying.
I like how you went to that, because that's true. Even though this Baroness did say that's not Anastasia, it had been quite a few years between the last time she had saw the young Grand Duchess and between this period of seeing Anderson. People's looks can change, especially if they're going through physical trauma, like, for example, maybe escaping people trying to assassinate you, living on the street. Yeah, there are factors coming into this where this is why people still believed Anderson's story that she was Anastasia, in spite of the fact that the Grand Duchess said this could not be her. Despite the dismissal of the relatives of the Romanov family and by the courts, her story was intriguing enough to become very popular. And this is where it starts getting into, I think, our generation, because there was a very famous 1997 animated film called...
The Romanovs?
Yes, Dave, the Romanovs. No, Anastasia.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, this animated feature film just followed years and years of speculation and intrigue about this case of Anastasia. And in this featured film, she escaped. She had a talking bat that was the talking bat was a compatriot of Rasputin, who was trying to eliminate her to take control of Russia. So it really nothing at all to do with the real story.
She didn't have a talking bat?
No, nor did Rasputin, as far as I know.
Aww.
Now, Rasputin did have a little bit of a relationship with her father, the Tsar, but as far as I know and as far as historical records could be found that I'm aware of, they had no interaction. So really for this film, he was just thrown in there because he was kind of this legendary figure, and you have an animated movie for kids, you need a villain. But this isn't the only instance of this entering pop culture. In addition to the intrigue that Anderson's claims made, which propagated the creation of many documentaries and books on the subject, Hollywood also made this into a 1956 movie, also called Anastasia, starring Ingrid Bergman.
Oh, interesting.
And then there was also a Broadway play based on the story.
I need to tell you, there is a TV series called The Romanovs, And the point of the series is it's a contemporary series, but it centers on separate stories about people who believe that they are the descendants of the royal Romanov family.
Intriguing.
Yes.
So the main bloodline, of course, as was originally thought, was severed because of both the Tsar, Nicholas II, and his immediate family perishing. There was extended family that were not held in this house for the case of the execution. So it'll be interesting to see how closely related in this Romanov series people are claiming to be connected to this dynasty.
Yeah.
With that said, though, I mean, getting back to the case of Anderson, rumors continued to persist throughout the years that the heiress to the throne had somehow escaped death, and this continued on and on to the point where Anderson, she made these claims. A lot of people were backing her, even decades after she made these original claims of being Anastasia. Then, in 1991, the mystery took a very bizarre turn.
Dun, dun, dun.
That was very dramatic, thank you.
Can you put a better dun, dun, dun in there?
No. So what do you think happened in 1991?
They found photographic evidence.
You're getting close.
They found the diary of all of the Romanovs.
Just their diary.
It's their diary.
Just I had lunch today. It was mediocre.
It was like modern day.
The Bolsheviks are giving me dirty looks.
It was like Instagram stories, but on paper. Anyway, sorry, continue.
Okay, well, think world history. What was happening around Russia around that time in the early 90s?
Cold War.
That's a little bit earlier.
Oh, yeah, because it ended in the... When did it end? 89?
Well, some would argue it never actually ended.
Oh,
but
I don't know. What was happening? War?
Well, think about, did the Soviet Union...
Oh, it collapsed.
It collapsed. Communism collapsed within the Soviet Union around the turn of 1991. So that also meant all the suppression that was happening of the Romanov dynasty also began to lift. And it was revealed that the bodies of most of the Romanovs and their servants lay in a mass grave, but the bodies of a male and a female child were missing.
Ooh.
So this lent credence to the possibility that young Anastasia may have escaped execution, which is why this became repopularized in the 1990s. And we saw a deluge of books come out. We saw the animated feature come out because the story was lent a little bit more authenticity by the fact that, yeah, there's a child missing. So with that, what's your thought on Anderson's claim right now?
There's more mystery added. I guess they could do some sort of DNA test on if there's any remains.
How about the fact that Anderson was not the only one who claimed to be Anastasia?
Oh, there's more than one?
There were at least 9 other women who claimed to be the Grand Duchess. And those are just recorded instances. There could have been even more through history, but there were 9 others, including a famous case of a woman named Eugenia Smith and a pair of nuns who claimed to be Anastasia and her sister Maria.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So which of the 9 was it?
Well, I'll tell you. At this point, we have more to go on because not only has, the veil been lifted in the Soviet Union, we now have this case where we have remains of the Romanov family. So you mentioned DNA testing. Brilliant idea. There is a lot of, easy debunking of some of these other claimants, saying that they were Anastasia because records were found about their past. They turned out they were lying or delusional. In fact, the only ones beyond Anderson that were not immediately debunked were the set of twins, the nuns that I mentioned. But it can be argued that quite possibly they were debunked because the missing remains were of a young girl and a young boy, and these were twin women. So potentially, that could be argued to debunk their claim. But what they decided to do was take DNA samples from the Romanov gravesite and compare them to a sample of DNA from Anderson. It was determined that she was not biologically related to the Romanov. In fact, Anderson's DNA did reveal something else. She was actually not Anna Anderson. She was born in Prussia, in what is now Bary Las in Poland, in 1896 under the name Franciszka Szankowska.
Wow.
That's the reason why they couldn't find any information on her, because she had an assumed name. And apparently she went through a long battle of mental illness where she claimed different identities. She held steadfast to the claim about being Anastasia, but she had a long track record of mental health issues in her past. In fact, even her family reported a sort of lineage of people suffering from mental illness. Now,
so what you're saying is it's the nuns.
Yes, that's exactly.
Okay. Whew, we solved it.
Solved that mystery. Well, I do have to say, this was found in 1991 when the grave was revealed. For Anderson, she was never actually given the information proving it because she had passed away in 1984, just a few years before the DNA proof refuting her claim could be presented. Regardless, though, the public found out definitively. But you do, even though you're joking, you do have a point. You know, if there's a missing pair of bodies and one of them's a young girl, maybe someone's claim is true. Maybe Anastasia did escape this execution.
And maybe they never said anything.
Maybe. So at this point, what is your thought? Do you think it's possible Anastasia survived?
I think it's possible, but there's really no proof other than the fact that there's 2 missing people. I guess that's proof.
Well, okay, for the sake of mind, what would it take for you to be convinced that Anastasia did not survive, that she was executed along with the rest of her family?
There'd have to be some sort of evidence.
Okay, good. I'm glad you brought that up because evidence was found in 2007.
Wow. You're shattering all my theories.
Sorry to shadow your hope, but in 2007, archaeologists discovered a second grave right around the existing grave where the original remains of the Romanovs were buried. And this grave contained 2 more sets of youthful bones. The initial grave's remains were matched with a sample of Nicholas II's DNA, which was extracted from bloodstains on a shirt worn during a failed assassination attempt. This DNA test showed that these remains were a positive match, which accounts for all of the Romanovs, which then shows, Anastasia, unfortunately, did not survive, even though the DNA testing cannot show which remains belong to what child. All of them are accounted for, so at this point, this theory is clearly debunked. This is a fiction.
Wow. One more question, though. Is there any evidence of the talking bat?
Not so far. That film, I don't think, is a documentary, so I don't think it counts.
Okay.
So I have one question about this to give to you, because we have very definitive proofs showing that Anderson definitely was not Anastasia, that it wasn't possible Anastasia survived because all the remains are accounted for. Why do people still question this? Why is this still within the popular consciousness?
Maybe people don't know that last part.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that last part.
And what is within the popular consciousness?
All the other stuff.
You're right. There's
the movies, the stories, and the other stuff wasn't really focused on as much, I don't think. Like, that's interesting. That should have been like, hey, look, here's all this information that proves this. But I think a lot of the things we talk about, whether we discover they're fiction or nonfiction, there's the whole thing of the myth. Some people just want to keep believing that despite the evidence.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the point of this is really just to scrutinize claims of identity like this, because in this day and age, with identity theft being such a huge issue, it's far easier for people actually to assume an identity. Yes, we have DNA testing, a technology, but then people can steal social security numbers. They can get fraudulent bank data. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do this, but it's very interesting to hear about this. For my state of mind, coming to terms with this is a little sad because I do love the idea of this young girl somehow escaping and fleeing Russia. We do talk about sometimes what's the point of this myth coming out, and part of it, I think, is also the suppression of this dynasty from the Bolsheviks, which would eventually become the Communist Party. Mm-hmm. Why were people so keen to believe this? Well, people love the monarchy. I don't really get it, but people love the British monarchy, and they love royal dynasties in general. So I think there's a certain romance to this and a little bit of hope that maybe the survival of Anastasia would be some sort of, well, I guess you could say cue that maybe the Communist Party was not as strong, not as capable as they were making themselves out to be.
They were also controlling the media and things like that. Quick question, though. We talked about how they discovered the burial site where the Romanovs were. Where did you get that information?
Okay, so there are plenty of resources available on that. You can find that in newspaper articles from various websites and publications such as The Guardian, New York Times. There's also a new slew of books that talks about the history of the Romanov lineage that came out after 2007. There's actually quite a few to reference, so I would say if you're interested in checking that out and finding out about the true history of Anastasia and the Romanov family, go to Windsor Public Library. We have plenty of books talking about that family and that story. It's well worth checking out. And of course, you can always verify and fact check with us as well. With that said, Dave, we may have unfortunately found out that Anastasia is no longer here, is not with us, but I think I do sense something is here. Could this be a random Dave fact?
It could be. And you know what? You know what I'm going to talk about? Yes, you guessed it. Giant sandwiches, because that's what we're going to talk about.
I guess the royals would have had giant sandwiches. I'm sure the Tsar probably did.
That's possible. But my question is, I'm going to state a fact, and you're going to tell me if it's fiction or nonfiction, because we're going to be discussing...
Dave, we do this all the time. If you're stating a fact, then it's nonfiction because it's true.
I'm going to ask you if this is not true or true.
Well,
you know what? I'm just going to tell you. So we're going to talk about the world's largest sandwich ever created and documented. Okay? So my question to you before I say what this is how big do you think the largest sandwich was?
I think it was as high as an elephant's eye and as wide as 2 hippopotami.
Okay, I shouldn't have asked you. So this is a picture in black and white of the world's largest sandwich in the US of A.
It looks like people are just standing on a pile of dirt.
It's not the best. I could have got a better picture. But anyways...
what is it? What are they standing on? Whole wheat?
They're standing around a giant sandwich. Now, there's 2 things I'm going to mention here. So the largest sandwich in the Guinness Book of World Records has been recorded in 2005. March 17th, 2005. The largest sandwich was created at Wild Woody's Chill and Grill in Roseville, Michigan. And the largest sandwich weighed 5,440 pounds. It was made, as mentioned, at this restaurant establishment, and it contained 150 pounds of mustard, 1,032 pounds of corned beef, 260 pounds of cheese, 530 pounds of lettuce, and the bread was over 3,000 pounds. Now,
and if you can eat it all in one sitting, then you get it for free, right?
Exactly. The sandwich was 12 feet long and 12 feet wide. Now, this was also this was on the Guinness Book of Records, but also I found another thing because there's other places that claim to have had the world's largest sandwiches, and there's different categories like the tallest sandwich. I'm not going to get into that.
Because that was going to be my question. Is it the weight? Is it like the height?
How wide and long the sandwich is, not how tall it is.
Not how much it weighs.
Weighs counts. I already said it weighed a lot. That weighed almost 6,000 pounds. Anyways, now there's another record out there, but this one is not in the US of A. It is in the Mexico City of Mexico.
The Mexico City of Mexico.
Yes, this is actually from an article on Reuters.
Oh.
Reuters is a very reliable, well-researched site. And they also mentioned the world's largest sandwich in the U.S. from the Guinness Book of Records in 2005. But what I'm going to mention is what Mexico did. So on July 27th in 2016, it looks like, a 216-foot monster torta sandwich was made.
Ooh.
Now, there are pictures on the interwebs if you would like to look at this. But I will read a quote from some people that made this. What is a torta sandwich? Well, it's obviously not a regional thing here around these parts, but it's a giant bread roll. You cut it in half, and you can put whatever you want inside it. So beans, pork, beef, ham, cheese, stew from the night before. So it's kind of like a whatever type sandwich.
Okay, so just a giant bread roll, you cut it in half, and you
Put
fill it
stuff
up
in
with
it.
whatever you want.
Yeah,
Okay.
basically. Okay, so this was organized by the local government in Mexico City. Yeah, they thought that they would do this and it would kind of help boost local businesses, give people a reason to come out. Yeah, it definitely worked. A lot of people were attracted to this news story. And if you look at a picture of it, it's a very large sandwich. But despite its super size, the sandwich didn't quite make it into the big league, according to this, because then it goes on to reference the sandwich I just mentioned. And then the honor of the longest sandwich goes to Lebanon. That was over 7.5 meters, which is 2,411 feet. And that was done in 2011.
I guess you could call it a Lebanon sandwich.
No, you can't. But this was a random fact about the world's largest sandwiches. And I hope you enjoyed that.
My question is, was it eaten?
That was never discussed. But these people in the picture, they look pretty darn hungry.
I mean, if I leave a slice of bread out on my counter for a day, it just becomes like a rock. Like, I can't imagine, like, this thing being exposed. I'm sure the flies loved it.
I'm sure they did. Would you like to see a closer look of the picture?
Not really. Too much corned beef. It still looks like a pile of dirt.
Yeah, it does. But it's a very large sandwich, and that's how I chose to present my information.
That's one large pile of dirt. Well, anyway, Dave, thank you for that. Definitely, if you have any questions about sandwiches or about the dynasties of any sort of royalty,
Yeah, like what is the largest sandwich you've ever eaten?
It's like, is that a question someone's going to send us?
Maybe.
What's the largest sandwich ever eaten by Nicholas II?
What's the largest sandwich ever eaten by a person today?
Well, for those types of questions or more sensical ones, you can always give us an email. Just send it to askalibrarian@windsorpubliclibrary.com, and in the subject area, just type fiction or nonfiction, and your question might be answered on a future episode. With that said, Dave, I'm feeling a little bit hungry after that sandwich talk. Let's go grab a bite. Until next time, I'm Adam.
I'm Dave.
And this has been Fiction
or Nonfiction.